They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings.
For thousands of years, ancient Sumerian tablets have remained silent. Not because they were unreadable, but because no one had the tools to truly understand them. That silence has now been broken. Using ultra-precise AI 3D reconstruction, researchers are uncovering symbols once dismissed as myth, distortion, or damage. But when those markings are digitally restored, they form a narrative far more unsettling than legend. These texts describe humanity not as a single shared beginning, but as a divided creation, shaped through events that were never meant to be preserved in official history. What emerges isn't just a forgotten past. It's a warning, one that challenges our assumptions about race, origin, and identity itself. And now that this hidden record has resurfaced, the story of who we are and where we came from can no longer be accepted at face value. But before we dive in, subscribe and step into the history hidden from humanity. The tablets that time locked away. For more than a century, archaeologists uncovered thousands of Sumerian texts from the ruins of Eridu and Nippur.
Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have.
Many were broken into fragments, while others sat untouched in museum storage rooms, untranslated, mislabeled, or forgotten. Cuneiform, the world's oldest known writing system, was notoriously difficult to work with. Its symbols could shift in meaning depending on context, and many of its words had no modern equivalent. Even when the signs were legible, the grammar often made little sense. Generations of scholars spent entire careers translating only fragments, never managing to piece together a full picture. Because of this, the world never saw the story in its entirety. That changed in 2026. Machine learning models trained on thousands of cuneiform inscriptions were released to researchers. These models did more than translate signs. They identified missing symbols, predicted broken endings, and cross-referenced dialects from Akkadian, Babylonian, and Old Sumerian. Suddenly, tablets that had been silent for 4 millennia began to speak again, and what they revealed was nothing like what experts had expected. For years, these texts had been dismissed as poetic creation myths. But once AI restored and compared them, hidden details surfaced. The tablets contained records, detailed ones. They described labor systems, classifications of people, and procedures involving blood, clay, and purpose. Some tablets listed these details in repetitive sequences, while others told them in a narrative form. But across all of them, consistent patterns appeared. The first shock was the discovery of multiple origin stories. The tablets did not treat humanity as a single invention. They used different terms, each tied to a role or function. They spoke of shaping forms after the likeness of the divine, but dividing them immediately by purpose. Humanity, according to these texts, was not created as one people. It was separated from the very beginning, and at least one group described more than once was created with obedience as its defining trait. Artificial intelligence flagged several recurring terms that stood out. One phrase loosely translated to function-bearing life. Another referred to those who do not multiply. A third, chillingly, was clay of lower glow. Scholars had long assumed these phrases were poetic or symbolic, but when AI reconstructed them in context, a different meaning appeared.
And they are issued quantities of lard along with other substances, including what I've called potash.
Some scholars now think these passages portray early humans designed without any capacity to reproduce. If accurate, this suggests they were intentionally created as a short-term labor force, never meant to live long enough to pass their characteristics forward. As more fragments were restored by AI, the central meaning grew increasingly clear. humanity was never the result of one singular moment of creation. Rather, it unfolded as an ongoing process. Humans were molded, refined, dismantled, and reconstructed. Certain versions were fully discarded, erased before they could leave any enduring trace in history. The notion that our species was separated before it even started was once dismissed as fringe theory. Now, the tablets themselves seemed to confirm it. There were categories, labels, and explanations, and for the first time, technology existed that could assemble the fragments into a unified whole. AI did not fabricate these concepts, it uncovered them. It transformed scattered legends into something resembling a blueprint, and that blueprint went beyond explaining how humans came into being. It revealed with disturbing precision what they were created to accomplish. Humans were created, but not as one species. The story was always straightforward. Gods shaped humans from clay. Yet the newly decoded tablets reveal another version, one far more complex and deeply unsettling. They don't speak of a single moment of creation. They describe phases, tests, abandoned attempts, and, above all, differences. Humans, according to these texts, were not made as one unified race. They were drafts and designs. Each group was crafted for a specific role. They weren't only built to labor. Distinct physical purposes were assigned. The tablets also applied separate labels to these early humans, terms long believed to mean humanity as a whole. But AI detected contrasts. Some passages used Lulu, a word roughly meaning man, while others used Sag-Gig, which one Sumerologist once translated as the black-headed people. That phrase was ignored for decades, yet AI linked it to another passage describing a group chosen for labor, with bodies formed from dark clay and eyes that never question. Were these symbolic divisions? Were they actual physical differences? No one can know with certainty. But the clarity of these distinctions implies something more, that from humanity's earliest moments, there were classes and functions we were born into and never permitted to escape. And it continues further. Additional tablets speak of gods judging the performance of each group. One passage refers to the clay of restless voice, a form of humanity that resisted command and was thrown into the rivers. Another describes a group whose arms were too frail to carry tools and were sent back to the mountains to vanish from memory. It's difficult not to see this as a kind of system or program, one that begins with an objective and achieves it not by forming equals, but by constructing specialized instruments that resembled us. The tablets mention a place called Iden Flatland, between two rivers, believed to function as a production ground. And each time a group was created, the gods would test them, name them, and sometimes eliminate them. None of these connections were visible before AI aligned the translations side by side. Scholars once saw disconnected pieces, but now we are witnessing what those pieces truly represented. And what they imply is that humanity did not have one single beginning. It had many, some erased, some altered, some still bearing the traits embedded in them from the beginning. The genetic alterations that came afterward were clear. The first humans were insufficient. That's what the tablets explain next. They labored, they complied, but they didn't endure. They were unable to reproduce. Every individual had to be individually formed, shaped from clay, blood, and sacred command. They were also forbidden to multiply. That restriction was intentional. It kept authority firmly with the gods. But eventually, that authority began to weaken. The tablets never state exactly why. Some suggest rebellion, others mention fatigue. Too many humans perishing, too few being created quickly enough. The process couldn't continue, so another revision was commanded. The tablets describe it directly. Enki, the god of wisdom, chose to alter the design. This time, he wouldn't simply create humans, he would improve them. The new version would be more intelligent, more resilient, capable of surviving independently, and, above all, capable of reproduction. A new being emerged. His name was Adapa. Unlike the others, Adapa was not a laborer. He wasn't formed solely for work. He was something greater. Referred to in the texts as chief among men, Adapa was said to hold divine vision and speech that stirred the heavens. He could communicate, think, and guide. His intellect was refined enough to grasp the god's intent and obey it. Yet even Adapa's wisdom had boundaries. He was designed to know much, but never everything. And when the moment came to test that loyalty, the outcome was final. According to the tablets, the account unfolds this way. Adapa was called to the heavens, where Anu, the sky god, presented him with the food of eternal life. But before leaving, Enki cautioned him not to eat or drink, to reject all offerings. So when the moment arrived, Adapa obeyed. He declined immortality. In that instant, humanity's chance at freedom disappeared. One choice, one order followed, and it fixed our destiny. The tablets also showed that Enki granted Adapa knowledge while withholding freedom. Whether this was deception or protection remains unknown. But the outcome was simple. Humans would live. They would expand, yet they would always die. That is what set Adapa apart. He was the connection, the divide between tool and species. And his creation signaled the beginning of something far more dangerous: separation. Because not everyone received the same enhancement. Some human lines stayed restricted, bound to labor, unable to think beyond assigned roles. Others, shaped after Adapa, were given greater independence. They could study, adjust, even command. That division, faintly hinted at in myth, becomes unmistakable through AI's analysis, because now every reference can be read together. Now we can identify which groups were empowered and which were merely designated. The origins of inequality stretch deeper than history. They trace back to the earliest choices not to offer everyone the same opportunity, and those choices would soon ignite a conflict, not only between humans and gods, but among the gods themselves. Anunnaki divisions. Control versus freedom. Not all gods agreed on what humans should become. The Sumerian texts make this clear. They openly describe a divide, a serious conflict over whether humanity should remain bound to the role it was created for or be allowed to grow beyond it. On one side was Enki, the same god who created Adapa, the one who granted humans reproduction, wisdom, and speech. Enki recognized possibility. He saw a species capable of thought, adaptation, and evolution. In certain texts, he is even named the father of humanity. His version of creation was flawed, but it was compassionate. On the opposite side stood Enlil, the enforcer of divine order, the keeper of decrees, the god who valued obedience above everything else. Where Enki saw tools that could grow, Enlil saw disorder waiting to erupt. He distrusted humans. He didn't want them advancing, and he despised what Enki had done. The texts portray Enlil's fury as swift and total. To Enlil, humans were defiant. Humans were violating the design, disturbing the system. And Enki, in his view, had crossed a line. So the gods began to fracture. Some aligned with Enki, subtly nurturing the expansion of human knowledge. Others remained loyal to Enlil, demanding limits, resets, and discipline. The outcome was a division not only in the heavens, but on earth as well. Some humans were guided through dreams, taught secrets of stars and seeds, and gifted writing, counting, and metalwork. Others were restrained, pushed back into labor, their bloodlines kept basic, silent, and controlled. AI translations reveal sharp contrasts in how early groups were treated. In one region, humans were described as guardians of grain and creators of laws. In another, as nameless ones, workers whose existence was erased the moment it began. This was managed progress and engineered inequality, driven by a divine split that continued to widen. At its height, the tablets describe a breaking moment. Enlil, enraged that humans had kept growing in number and ability, made a final choice to wipe them out through the Great Flood. Enlil's flood was not about cleansing the world. It was about ending a project that had gone too far, erasing what he judged a failure and restoring order. But once again, Enki interfered. He found a man and warned him. That man, later known as Ziusudra Utnapishtim, or Noah, became the final link in the human chain. Enki did not save everyone. He was unable to, but he saved enough to continue the line and protect the version of humanity he believed in. Yet the conflict did not end. It simply took a different form. Advanced technology in the wrong hands. The creation stories were unsettling enough, but what followed went far beyond that. Buried deep within the tablets, hidden between hymns of creation and divine bloodlines, were passages that didn't feel like myth at all. They read like reports and technical notes, descriptions of tools, substances, and systems that shouldn't have existed in that era. Now, with AI helping decode them, those lines are readable at last, and they raise questions with no clear answers. How could a civilization from 5,000 years ago describe flight? How could they understand how metals behave under heat? How could they speak of energy so intense it turned daylight into flame? One passage describes craft with wings of wood and metal racing through the sky, driven not by wind, but by fire contained within. Another mentions a liquid metal sealed inside a chamber of heat, driven by pulses and thunder. For decades, these phrases were written off as poetic language, but when AI compared them side by side, it identified a structure. The same elements appeared repeatedly: wings, vessels, heat, propulsion, thunder. The texts never claimed these devices were imagined. They said they were granted by the gods, not to all humans, but to those deemed worthy, those loyal to divine authority, those who had proven useful. Knowledge, according to the Sumerian tablets, was not discovered. It was assigned and then turned into power. I highlighted a group of lines describing a light that scorched the land and left no bodies behind. Another passage speaks of mountains torn apart by fire and cities erased in a single day. For traditional scholars, these were metaphors for storms or natural catastrophe. But others now question that view. Some researchers believe the texts are describing technologies that wouldn't reappear for millennia. Advanced metalworking, directed energy, even controlled flight through the air. What's more disturbing is that this knowledge was never shared evenly. Certain human groups received these tools. Others were intentionally kept from them. What kind of civilization grants metallurgy to one group and denies even language to another? The answer appears to be a civilization that wasn't organic, one built from the top down, with humans placed not at the center, but at the lowest tier. And even within that system, there was no equality. Some were designed to rule, others to serve. And those who challenged the structure vanished from history. One line states simply, "They were shown the mountain, and the mountain did not return them." We don't know what that truly means, but one thing is clear. The more AI translates, the sharper the pattern becomes. Technology in the ancient world wasn't a miracle. It was a tool used to divide one type of human from another, and soon that division would deepen even further, reaching beyond labor, tools, or loyalty, and into time itself. The Sumerian warning. The Sumerians were not only builders, record keepers, or worshippers. They were observers. That is what the tablets reveal once AI brings every fragment together. The Sumerians did not merely gaze at the stars, they measured them. For 700 years, priests in cities like Ur and Babylon documented eclipses, planetary movements, and even subtle changes in distant stars, all without telescopes, all without modern mathematics. They believed the sky was not decoration. It was a message system, and they were waiting for something. The name that appears repeatedly is Nibiru, a celestial body said to move in a vast orbit, one that returns every 3,600 years. Ancient scholars long dismissed it as myth, but now AI has uncovered something different. References to cycles and long-term patterns, warnings connected not only to Nibiru's return, but to its effects. The texts do not describe Nibiru as a planet. They call it the crossing, the destroyer, the one that veils the light. And each time it passes, something changes. With AI restoring the missing lines, a pattern is becoming clear. The warnings were never meant for everyone. Only specific humans were informed. The texts describe those favored by Enki as watchers, keepers, silent observers who lived on the edges, passing coded stories through generations. According to these translations, the return of Nibiru was not only destruction. It was a moment when the order was erased and replaced with another. And each time it occurs, humanity forgets, and the stories fade. But one thing endures: the division. The idea that some groups were never intended to survive these resets, that ancient creators may have designed certain people for extinction and others for continuation. Thanks for watching. If you found this intriguing, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.